In one of our past videos, we talked about how modern medicine is killing people, the shocking truth. Today, we decided to continue our conversation about surgery, and more specifically, black transplant surgery. So, thousands of years ago, people looked at disease as a curse from the gods. The human body was a mystery, and medicine was more magic than science. But it was these first steps that became the foundation for what we call modern medicine. Medicine began with the most primitive observations. In ancient Egypt, priests treated wounds with herbs and honey. In ancient India, Ayurvedic practices based on the balance of body and soul developed. And in ancient Greece, Hippocratic first suggested that diseases had physical causes rather than divine causes. Let's note with you the key moments in the development of ancient medicine. First, these are the first written references in ancient Egypt to the treatment of wounds, including the use of natural antiseptics. Second, we should mention here the eminent ancient Greek healer and philosopher Hippocrates, 460 to 370 BC, the founder of medicine, who developed an oath that is still used by physicians today. But what if I told you that in ancient times, doctors didn't just treat, but experimented with transplants? There are references in ancient Chinese texts to attempts at skin grafting. Of course, this was far from science, but these ideas lived on for thousands of years. Imagine surgery without anesthesia, where every operation is a deadly risk. This is what medicine looked like until the 19th century. This began to change with the advent of anesthesia and antiseptics. 1846, first use of anesthesia in surgery in Massachusetts. It made it possible to perform long operations without the patient suffering. 1867, Joseph Lister introduced the use of antiseptics, which reduced the mortality rate after surgery by 90%. Due to these advances in practical medicine, doctors began amputating limbs with minimal mortality since the early 1800s. Complex operations on internal organs became possible by the end of the 19th century. But here's the interesting thing. Back in the Middle Ages, doctors tried to transplant tissues, such as skin. These experiments were dangerous and often failed. The real revolution came only in the 8th century, when medicine stepped beyond the boundaries of the possible. Imagine you are dying of kidney failure. Your only salvation is an organ from another person. Today it seems commonplace, but in the middle of the 20th century, it was a real revolution. Let's talk about the first successes in transplantology. 1954. In Boston, Joseph Murray performed the first successful kidney transplant between twin brothers. This operation ushered in the era of transplantology. 1967. In South Africa, Christian Barnard transplanted the first heart. The patient lived for 18 days, which at the time was considered a miracle. 1980s. The advent of immune-suppressing drugs made it possible to perform transplants from unrelated donors. As for today's medical statistics, approximately 150,000 organ transplants are performed worldwide each year. The most popular organs are kidneys, 60% of operations, liver, 20%, and heart, 10%. But here is a serious concern. For every successful transplant, there are dozens of failures. The risk of organ rejection remains a major problem. And while doctors have been searching for a solution, the organ market has begun to go underground. Ideally, medicine should save lives. But in reality, it often becomes a commodity. And the most expensive commodity on this market is human organs. Just imagine the current prices for human organ transplant surgeries. Heart transplant, $1.5 million. Liver transplant, $500,000, $800,000. Kidney transplant, $200,000, $400,000. As for the statistics on organ transplant requests, they are extremely alarming. More than 1 million people need organ transplants each year, and only 10% of patients receive the necessary operations. Quite naturally, this situation has spawned a black market. According to the World Health Organization, up to 10% of all operations are performed illegally. The main countries where the bulk of illegal operations are performed are India, Pakistan, and China. But do you know what the scariest part is? In some countries, organs are forcibly removed. In China, for example, there is evidence of prisoners having their organs removed without their consent. And it's not a fantasy, it's a reality. The black market for organs is the dark side of modern medicine. It's billions of dollars, thousands of surgeries, and lives on the line. Let's, as always, turn to the facts. On the black market, a kidney costs between $50,000 and $100,000. A heart costs about $1 million. Today, kidneys account for over 70% of illegal surgeries. In Pakistan, for example, poor people sell kidneys for $1,000 to pay off debts. In some other countries, organs are taken from political prisoners and then sold to foreign patients. Leading scientists have always wondered if modern biotechnology could solve this problem. What if organs could be grown rather than taken from people? It would seem like the perfect solution, but unfortunately it opens a new dark chapter. Genetic engineering, salvation or elitist solution. Now imagine, organs no longer need to be taken from people. They can be grown. Does that sound like science fiction? But it's already a reality. And we have the following modern scientific and practical advances to prove it. 2022. First, transplanted heart from a genetically modified pig. The patient lived for 60 days. 2024, growing livers and kidneys in laboratories. So where do we stand today in terms of technology? For example, CRISPR allows us to edit DNA and create perfect organs. In turn, stem cell research continues to advance, opening up incredible opportunities for humanity to regenerate tissues. But at the same time, there are problems of another kind. For example, the cost of such operations exceeds $1 million, and in terms of ethics, who should decide who gets an artificial organ? There is hope that genetic engineering can change the world, but it also increases social inequality. The rich can afford organs while the poor can only dream. To summarize, it is safe to say that today we live in a world where modern medicine is working miracles. However, only a select few have access to these miracles. And once again, let us return to the statistics. More than 150,000 people die each year on the transplant waiting list. About 20% of patients will never wait for surgery. You want to hear the realities of today? Well, in the US, organ transplants are only possible through long and endless waiting lists. In developing countries, ordinary people are willing to sell their organs extremely cheaply just to survive in their own country. What have we come to? A world where technology is supposed to save people is turning into a world where salvation is not available to everyone. What does the future hold? From the first steps of medicine to modern technology, a millennium has passed. We can save millions of lives, but what have we lost along the way? Medicine that should be accessible to all has become a privilege for a select few. Black transplantology, the organ market, elite technology. This is not fantasy, it's our reality. The question is not how much human life costs, but can we afford to value it truly?